My topic is containment and protection measures for Kauri dieback, but initially I want to look at the current distribution of PDA and also look at how it got around. Those red marks on that map are the current distribution that we know of for PDA. Two major epicentres, one up at Waipoa and the other at Waitakere. I want to talk about some of the spread scenarios, and to do that we go back to Waipoa Forest Nursery in the mid-1950s. Forest Service had a nursery at Waipoa from the 1930s right through the late 60s, and in the cohort of trees that came out of that nursery in about 1955, 56, 57, PDA has shown up subsequently in the stands that those trees were distributed to. Trees went to Omahuta Forest in Northland, to Ratea Forest in the Mongamuka Range, to Russell Forest, to Glenvervie Forest, and to Great Barrier Island, and to other parts of Waipoa Forest. So those carefully nurtured plants conveyed PDA, we think, to all those places, because subsequently we found PDA in all those sites. We haven't found PDA in Waipoa distributed seedlings prior to 1955, and we haven't found it after, I think, 1957. So something happened in the nursery at that time that brought the disease there. It's very likely that the mechanism was actually using leaf litter from the forest in the nursery as part of their nursery propagation practices. But we haven't got proof of that, but that's the inference. So the disease may have already been in Waipoa at that stage, and the transfer of material from the forest brought the disease in the nursery. We don't know how it got to Waitakere, but we think it's been there since the late 60s. I'll just go through the spread scenarios. You've heard quite a bit on this. Agriculture and forestry, vehicles and machineries, domestic livestock, mostly especially cattle because they're heavy and they like crashing through the forest and they convey a lot of mud. Wild pigs and wild pig hunters, and cannabis cultivation. In the late 80s, we got funded, I was working for the doc then, to carry out 1080 operations on Waipoa Forest, and certainly flying over Waipoa, we were stunned at how much cannabis we saw in plantations there. So, you know, I think Bruce alluded earlier to the good light characteristics of the Kauri forest, and he's not the first person who's noticed that, obviously. Visitors convey soil on their footwear, and management personnel also get around the forest. So there's a lot of activities in the forest that are management based. And of course there's natural spread, and anyone who's, I think Ian Horner got a surprise when he was testing his phosphite the first time. He killed the tree, he not only killed the tree that he injected, he killed the tree next door to it, because Kauri tends to be root grafted, and so the disease can spread quite rapidly through a contiguous stand. PDA hasn't been found in some really important places, as you know. Hasn't been found on Coromandel, Hunua, Kaimai-Mamaku, Waikato, Bay of Plenty, and Upper Northland. If you exclude those two spot infections at Omahuta and Ratea, there's big tracts of northern forest that don't have PDA. So a crude map shapes it up as follows. Far north is looking fairly okay, and south and west of Waitakere, south and east of Waitakere is looking okay. That's a preliminary picture. We haven't finished surveying, and we may find some bad news in some of those places which we currently hope are free of PDA. I want to talk about containment and protection measures. And just a note here that Kauri has been devastated in the past, and the 1 to 3% of remaining kauri is a figure that we hear quoted. That devastation has isolated kauri forests from each other, so it is quite tricky for PDA to get from one site to another without help. And so the natural spread is not going to be so much a feature because of this natural isolation. That's a little kauri stand in the Kaifara, which it does appear to be infected, although we haven't ground truth that yet. Hygiene measures usually mean scrubbing, and the critical message of clean your gear, clean your shoes, and do it before you go into the forest, and do it before you go to another forest is the fundamental message. We assist that by providing kits, and this is a personal kit. You've encountered these crate stations at the entry points to forests, and where the visitor numbers are high, we install these barrel and grate stations. There are issues with barrel and grate station usage, and this person here is quite agile and is managing to do this quite well. I'm not agile, and I have great difficulty spraying the sole of my foot without sitting down, so there's some work to do on the ergonomics of these stations. We have a very good suite of signage, and the style of it, I think initially people were not attracted to it, but I think through time the wisdom of the people who put this package together has been demonstrated. It's good stuff, and also we have a style guide based on these patterns. So if we want to commission one-off signage, we can do that. Track improvements. This is a beautiful track in the eastern side of Puketi Forest. But you can see that you walk past large kauri trees on bare ground. Your feet are in contact with roots. Further down the track it's muddy, so we have a significant issue there, and we solve it by getting the feet off the ground. So it's not as pleasant as strolling through on the spongy turf, but the separation of the feet from the ground also keeps you out of the mud and stops the transfer. We have machinery cleaning facilities, and we have machinery cleaning standards, and we have standard operating procedures for staff and contractors and concessionaires. That's Tom Donovan carrying out soil sampling in a piece of kauri forest at the butt end of the Cape Breton Peninsula on Maori land. And you'll notice he's hung his bag in the tree so that it's not on the ground. He takes a soil sample here. Before he moves to the next tree, he cleans all his gear and cleans his footwear, and he cleans his knees because he has to kneel down to take those soil samples. So all those procedures he's working to are in the soil sampling procedure that he's contracted to implement. We're going to be looking, I think, at more and more access limitation, and I say this with sadness because I've always appreciated the right to wander at will in kauri forests. But we'll have track and road closures, we've already got those, track diversions, track and facility upgrades. We've put probably restrictions on concessionaires so that they're not necessarily driving their vehicles in to collect their beehives. Hunting restrictions. Hunting has already been restricted in some places, and that is likely to occur more. Protected area closures. We may move to formal closures of conservation areas and parks. And Rahui. Rahui's been implemented in Punaruku, and it's a tool that the program needs to learn more about because it's an old way of giving the forest a rest, and these forests do need a rest. Go on to formal planning measures, regional pest management plans. The PDA is notified under the Northland pest management strategy, and I understand that Auckland and Waikato are likely to follow that lead. The Resource Management Act allows the placement of rules in district and regional plans, and it also provides a forum for advocacy. For a site that's infected, we use a risk assessment process. So the risk assessment process basically convenes all of the identifiable interested parties who go through a formal risk assessment process. And here's an example of one. This is a group which convened recently to look at the recently identified infection of Pukekarora, which is that fine mong just north of Kaiwaka, which has demonstrated 2 out of 3 positive sites of the samples that were taken. That's Nigel Miller on the left there. He's from DOC. It's a DOC administered reserve, so he convened the risk assessment. Ross Johnson from Northern Regional Council next to him. Mrs. Steiner, who's the landowner of this particular property. In the background, Makaira Miru from Te Uria Hau, and Linnell Greer from the Ops Group. She's a technical advisor for visitor facilities, and the 2 neighbours here, and who are also connected to the community, and myself there from MPI, and Ian Mitchell, my colleague from MPI, took the photographs. So, because there are no tracks and there are no pigs in Pukekarora, we didn't need to bring in the pig hunting interests and so on. So that risk assessment that we went to, identifying all the vectors that we could recognise for that site and looking at mitigation measures for each, gets translated into a site management plan, which is circulated to the interested parties and then consolidated and implemented. So there's Pukekarora on the left, there's the house in the foreground we met in, there's the infected ridge running down where the positive samples were found, and here's Highway 1 running alongside it. So this Pukekarora is a big challenge for the program because it's the most visible piece of Kauri on Highway 1 in the whole of New Zealand. So yes, its infection is going to be highly visible to the public. The Hunua Park staff developed a whole of park plan to protect the Hunua from Kauri Dieback, and they developed a plan, they costed it, and they've implemented it. And that vehicle cleaning facility I showed you previously has been installed recently at Hunua. If you do have to clean a vehicle between Kauri sites, a commercial car wash is a good way of doing it. Coromandel Forum, Coromandel's been recently identified as being tentatively PDA free, and a community and agency forum has convened there to look at developing a plan and implementing a plan to protect the Coromandel. Looking ahead, and some of these are speculative, but I think we can expect to have eradication plans for spot infections such as the one at Oamahuta and such as the infection at Ratea. We will need protection plans for iconic trees because issues around them are very complex. And hopefully we'll have recovery plans for the seriously infected but treasured forests such as Waipoa and Waitakere. I'd also anticipate there's going to be greater community engagement and capture of the program. Public do seem very interested in this, and the engagement we've had so far has been very strong. And I don't need to emphasise there's a lot at stake. That's Pukekarora there, it's the best stand of second growth Kauri in New Zealand. And this, as you all know, is Te Mata Ngāhere. I'd like to thank these people who helped me put this together, and that's the end of my talk, so thank you.